The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the small suburban town where Laura Crawford had spent her childhood. The streets were quiet, the world still, as if waiting for something extraordinary to break the silence. But for Laura, today felt like just another day, a day filled with routines and memories she had long since buried beneath the weight of her adult responsibilities. It had been over 15 years since she last visited her grandmother's house, and when she received the call that Grandma Edith had passed away, a part of her heart cracked open in a way she hadn't expected. Edith had always been the center of her world as a child, a woman with a smile as warm as the summer sun and a voice as comforting as a lullaby. But life had pulled them apart, as it often does with time. And now Laura was standing at the threshold of the old house, staring at the front door that once felt like home. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the doorknob. The house was still the same, with its weathered white paint and ivy creeping up the walls. The smell of must and old wood drifted in through the cracks, bringing with it the memories of summers spent running through the backyard, of sitting at the kitchen table, sharing stories with Edith, and of the attic, a place that had always intrigued Laura, but also filled her with an inexplicable sense of unease. Her parents had never spoken much about the attic. It was always off-limits, a place that seemed to hold secrets no one was willing to share. But Grandma Edith had never shied away from telling stories, even if they were tinged with sadness or mystery. She had often hinted that there was something in the attic, something important, but never gave Laura a full explanation. Now, with Edith gone and the house left to her, the attic was no longer a forbidden space. It was hers to explore. Laura stepped inside, the door creaking behind her. The house was just as she remembered it, with its familiar creaks and sighs. The staircase to the attic stood at the far end of the hall, dark and silent, like a hidden passage to another world. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. There was something waiting for her, something she needed to find. As she ascended the narrow staircase, the air grew colder, and the dust in the air seemed to shimmer like tiny stars. The attic door was slightly ajar, as though it had been expecting her. Laura pushed it open, her heart pounding in her chest. The attic was just as she remembered it, a vast, cluttered space filled with old furniture, forgotten heirlooms, and boxes upon boxes of things that had been long since abandoned. But there, in the far corner, was something new. A small wooden box sat on top of an old trunk, its surface worn and scratched with age. It wasn't a box she recognized, and yet something about it called to her. She approached it slowly, her fingers trembling as she reached for the lid. Inside the box, nestled among yellowed papers and faded photographs, was a letter, an envelope sealed with red wax, the intricate design of a flower embossed on the surface. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she turned the envelope over, her hands shaking as she carefully broke the seal. The letter inside was written in a flowing, elegant script, the ink dark and bold against the yellowed paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Edith's. "My dearest Laura, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here to explain. There are things in this life that we keep hidden, things that are too painful to speak of, even to those we love most. But you deserve the truth. You deserve to know what I have kept from you all these years. I know you have always wondered about the things I never spoke of. The past I kept locked away in the corners of my mind, but it is time, my dear, for you to learn the truth. You must go to the place where it all began, the place where our lives were changed forever. Only then will you understand why I have kept this secret. I hope you can forgive me. With all my love." Grandma Edith Laura sat back on the dusty floor of the attic, the letter trembling in her hands. Her mind raced as she processed the words. The truth? What truth? What had Grandma Edith kept from her? And why had she never spoken of it? The weight of the letter in her hand seemed to pull her deeper into the mystery, urging her to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long. She stood up, the letter still clutched in her fingers, and turned her attention to the rest of the attic. The room felt different now, as if it was waiting for her to find something. A clue, a sign, something that would unlock the truth behind Edith's cryptic message. The box was filled with old papers, photographs, and journals, but none of them seemed to hold the answer she was looking for. Laura's eyes wandered to the far corner of the attic, where an old trunk stood. It was weathered and worn, but there was something about it that seemed important, as though it had been waiting for her all these years. She approached it carefully, feeling a strange sense of reverence as she ran her fingers over the lid. Taking a deep breath, she lifted it open. Inside, the trunk was filled with old clothes, faded quilts, and yellowed letters. But one thing caught her eye, a small, leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. Laura picked it up, her heart pounding as she opened it to the first page. It was a journal, written in Edith's handwriting. As she began to read, the world around her seemed to fade away. The words on the pages told a story she had never heard before, of a love lost, of secrets hidden, of a past that had been buried so deep that it could never be spoken of again. And as Laura read, she began to understand. The truth was more complicated than she could have ever imagined, and the journey ahead of her would change everything. Laura sat cross-legged in the dusty attic, the leather-bound journal resting in her lap. Her fingers traced the delicate edges of the worn pages, the faint smell of aged paper filling the air. She could feel the weight of the secrets contained within those pages, and yet the yearning for answers pushed her forward, urging her to keep reading. The journal was divided into several sections, each one chronicling a different part of Edith's life, some familiar, some entirely new. Laura started at the beginning, her eyes scanning the elegant handwriting, captivated by the intimate details her grandmother had shared with the pages. The first entry was dated nearly 50 years ago, long before Laura was born. April 14th, 1975. It feels strange to be writing in this journal again, after so many years. I suppose this will be my only confidant for a while. There are things I need to say, things I need to remember. My family doesn't know yet, but I can feel the weight of what's coming. The decision I've made has changed everything. I don't know how to make sense of it all. Laura paused, her heart heavy as she read the words. What decision was Edith referring to? The sense of unease from the first letter deepened, and Laura found herself wondering what her grandmother had gone through, what led her to make such a decision that it had to be kept secret. She flipped to the next page. May 3rd, 1975. I've been keeping my distance from my family. They don't know about him. How could they? If only they knew what I was carrying inside. I've tried to tell myself it's not real, but I know it is. It's there, growing, changing, impossible to ignore. He's gone now, but I can't forget. Him, his name haunts me, his touch lingers in my mind. I have to keep this a secret no matter what. It's the only way to protect everyone I love. Laura's breath caught. Who was Edith talking about? The him in her grandmother's words felt like an unknown figure, someone who had caused her grandmother so much pain. Laura flipped a few more pages, desperately seeking more answers. June 12, 1975. I've made my decision. I will leave. It's the only way to protect myself and the life I want to build. The family doesn't know about what happened, and they never will. I can never go back to that place. Not after what I've done. There's no going back now. I'm leaving everything behind. Maybe one day I'll return, but not for a long time. Not until things have healed. But for now, I will say goodbye. To the world I've known, and embrace the life that awaits me. The words hit Laura like a cold gust of wind. Her grandmother had left everything behind, not just the man who haunted her thoughts, but her entire life. The weight of her grandmother's decision was unbearable. Laura had always known Edith as a loving, strong woman, but this revealed a side of her grandmother she could never have imagined. Laura quickly turned the pages, each one offering more glimpses into Edith's hidden past. The entries continued to describe a struggle, an intense love, a painful decision. Edith had given up her family, her friends, and a life she once knew to protect someone she loved. The journal didn't say what happened to the man, but it became increasingly clear that whatever had transpired between them had shattered Edith in ways that were too painful to revisit. The last entry in the journal was dated just a few months before Laura was born. November 8th, 1980. I'm tired. I've kept my secret for so long, and I don't know how much longer I can bear it. Laura, my dear girl, I don't know if I will ever have the courage to tell you the truth. Maybe it's better this way. I can't ask you to forgive me for the choices I've made. I don't even know if I can forgive myself, but I must keep you safe. I must protect you from the knowledge that could destroy everything. Maybe one day, when the time is right, I'll tell you everything. But for now, I must let go of the past and embrace the future with you in my arms. My precious granddaughter, I will do everything I can to keep you from the darkness that surrounds my life. The last entry was heartbreakingly final. Edith had never planned to tell Laura the truth. She had written those words knowing that the secret she carried would remain buried forever. The question now was why. Laura closed the journal gently, her heart aching. It felt as though she had just read a letter from a woman who had loved her so deeply, yet had carried a burden too heavy to share. The weight of her grandmother's pain seemed to echo through the attic, reverberating in the silence around her. Edith had left a trail of cryptic clues, but Laura felt no closer to understanding the full story. Her mind raced. The man Edith had been involved with, who was he? What had happened to him? Why had Edith chosen to leave everything behind? And most importantly, what did it all have to do with Laura? As she sat there, trying to make sense of the journal, Laura's gaze fell on something else in the box. Another letter, much like the one she had already read. This one, however, was addressed to her. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. My dearest Laura, by now you have likely read the journal, and perhaps you are beginning to understand. But I fear there is much more I need to tell you. I know you will find your way to the truth, but be careful. The past is not as distant as you think. It is closer than you realize, and the consequences of uncovering it may be more than you can bear. I love you more than words can express. But this is a journey you must take alone. With all my love, Grandma Edith. Laura's chest tightened. The letter seemed to confirm what she had already suspected. The answers she was searching for were hidden somewhere in her grandmother's past. But as much as she needed to know, she could feel the weight of the warning in Edith's words. Was she ready to continue? Would learning the truth about her grandmother destroy everything she thought she knew about her family? The decision weighed heavily on Laura's heart. But there was no turning back now. She had to know. For herself. For her grandmother. As she closed the box, the room felt smaller, suffocating almost. Laura knew that whatever lay ahead, the past she was about to uncover would change everything, and in that moment she could no longer deny the truth. The woman she thought she knew, the woman who had raised her with love and wisdom, was hiding a darkness that would soon become Laura's own to face. The morning after discovering the second letter, Laura felt the weight of the decision she had made, pressing down on her like a stone. Her heart was heavy with the knowledge that her quest for answers would lead her into a labyrinth of family secrets. but there was no turning back now. The attic had already begun to feel like a distant memory, replaced by the overwhelming sense that her entire life was about to shift. After a sleepless night spent poring over the journal and the letters, Laura knew she had to begin her search outside of Edith's home. The journal had provided clues, but there were still too many unanswered questions. There were people from her grandmother's past she needed to find, people who might hold the missing pieces of the puzzle. Her first step, she decided, would be to visit the town's historical society. There might be old records, photographs, or perhaps even individuals who had known Edith in her younger days. Laura placed the letters and the journal back into the wooden box, securing it beneath the attic floorboards. She felt a strange sense of finality, as though leaving the box there was a way of promising herself that she would not run from the truth. Not anymore. As she closed the attic door behind her, the house seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it too was holding its breath. Laura grabbed her jacket, slung her purse over her shoulder, and stepped out the front door, locking it behind her. The world outside was bright and bustling, and for a moment she found herself wondering if anything had changed at all. The drive to the historical society took longer than she expected. The town hadn't grown much over the years, but it felt different somehow. The familiar streets were now filled with unfamiliar faces, the names of old shops had changed, and the once welcoming town square now seemed more sterile, as if time had stripped it of its character. She parked in front of the small brick building and took a deep breath. The historical society was quiet, its windows darkened by the age of the building, but the door creaked open with a welcoming sound as Laura stepped inside. The place was dusty but warm, filled with the scent of old paper and wood. Shelves of books lined the walls, filled with local history and photographs of the town's past. In the far corner, a large wooden desk stood, its surface cluttered with papers. Behind it sat a woman in her late 60s, wearing glasses perched on the end of her nose and an apron covered in ink stains. She looked up as Laura approached. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked, her voice soft but sharp with curiosity. "I hope so," Laura replied. "I'm looking for information about my grandmother, Edith Crawford. She lived in town for many years." The woman's eyebrows arched in recognition. "Edith Crawford. That name is familiar. Let me see what I can find." Laura watched as the woman sifted through a stack of files, her fingers moving quickly, but with the careful precision of someone accustomed to handling old documents. After a moment, the woman pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk to Laura. "There's not much here," she said. "Mostly photographs, a few articles. Edith was well liked around here, but she left rather suddenly years ago, and we didn't hear from her much after that. Some people were upset by her departure. I think she might have been close with a few folks. Back then, I believe there's one person in town who would know more, Marion Ballard. She was Edith's best friend in those days." Laura's interest piqued. "Do you have her contact information?" The woman smiled, revealing a gap in her teeth. "I do, but Marion's a bit of a recluse now. You'll find her up on Elm Street, in the house at the end of the road. She doesn't entertain visitors often, but she was Edith's confidant for a long time, so she might be able to help you." "Thank you," Laura said, her heart racing as she gathered the folder. The mention of Marion felt like a door opening to another chapter of the mystery. Her grandmother's best friend, perhaps the one person who could shed light on the past. The drive to Marion's house took another 20 minutes. Elm Street was a quiet road, lined with tall, looming trees and old homes with wide porches. When Laura reached the end of the road, she saw the house she was looking for. A large, weathered Victorian with a wraparound porch. It looked abandoned at first, its windows dusty and overgrown with ivy, but Laura noticed the faint light in one of the upper windows. A sign of life. She parked her car on the street and walked up the cracked path. her shoes crunching against the gravel. As she reached the door, she hesitated. What would Marion know? Would she even want to talk to a stranger about Edith? Laura raised her hand to knock, but before she could, the door creaked open. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, her face lined with age, but still sharp, with the gaze of someone who had seen it all. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and she wore a simple cardigan over a blouse. "Yes?" the woman asked, her voice raspy but strong. "Are you Marion Ballard?" Laura asked gently. The woman's eyes narrowed as if assessing Laura carefully. "I am. And you are?" "My name is Laura Crawford," she said. "I'm Edith's granddaughter." The name seemed to trigger something in Marion. She studied Laura for a long moment before stepping back and opening the door wider. "Come in then," she said. "I suppose it's time someone asked the questions." Marion's house was a reflection of the woman herself, neat but filled with the clutter of a lifetime's worth of memories. Family photos, old books, and fragile antiques were scattered throughout the rooms. Laura sat down in a chair by the window, watching the light shift as Marion settled across from her, her hands folding neatly in her lap. "I suppose you've come for the story," Marion said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of many years. "The story about Edith, about what happened." Laura nodded. "Yes, I've read her journal, but there's so much she didn't say. She kept so much hidden. I need to understand." Marion's gaze softened as she looked at Laura, a wistful expression crossing her face. "Edith was a complicated woman, dear, a loving one, but there was a darkness she could never shake. It started with him, the man she loved. But there's more to it than that, more than you could possibly imagine." The air in the room grew thick with unspoken words. Laura's heart raced as Marion continued. "Edith left town because she had no choice," Marion continued. "She loved him, and that love came with consequences she could never escape." Laura leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "Who was he?" Marion's eyes flickered with a mixture of sadness and regret. "His name was Jacob Rhodes," she whispered. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Laura's heart raced as Marion Ballard's words hung in the air like an invisible weight. Jacob Rhodes. The name resonated in her mind, a puzzle piece she hadn't yet understood, but one that was crucial to the mystery she was determined to solve. Marion sat across from her, the light from the window casting a soft glow on her weathered face. For a long moment, Marion didn't speak, her eyes distant as if she were reliving a time long buried. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was softer, tinged with sorrow. "Jacob Rhodes was not just any man, Laura," she said, her gaze flickering to the window as if searching for a distant memory. "He was a man with a past, and one that Edith, like so many others, didn't fully understand until it was too late." Laura leaned forward, every fibre of her being hanging on Marion's next words. "What happened between them? Why did Edith leave everything behind?" Marion hesitated, as if weighing how much of the truth she was willing to reveal. "You see, Laura, when your grandmother first met Jacob, she was just a young woman, naive, full of hope and desperate to believe in love. She had her whole life ahead of her, or so she thought. But Jacob was different. He had a darkness about him, a past that he kept hidden even from her. At first it was easy to overlook. He was charming, persuasive, and the way he looked at her, well, that's something a young woman can't resist. He made her feel special, like she was the only person in the world that mattered." Marion paused, taking a slow breath, and Laura could feel the weight of her words. "But love, real love, has a price, Laura, and sometimes that price is more than we can afford." Marion's eyes locked with Laura's, her expression hardening. Jacob wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't just a charming young man with a troubled past. He was tangled up in something far darker. "What do you mean?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marion took a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jacob had been involved with the wrong people. He had debts, criminal ties, and enemies. People who didn't care about him or your grandmother. They only cared about what they could get from him. And when Edith got too close, when she started to see who Jacob really was, that's when everything fell apart. Laura's mind raced. What happened? Why did Edith leave? Marion looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she clasped them together. Jacob promised your grandmother that everything would be fine. He said he was going to get out of that life, that he was going to make things right. But when push came to shove, he made a decision that changed everything. She looked up at Laura, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and sorrow. He betrayed her. And it wasn't just any betrayal. It was a betrayal that threatened her life. Laura's stomach twisted. What do you mean? There were people after him, Marion said softly. Dangerous people. And when Edith found out what he was really involved in, she tried to leave him. But it was too late. They came after her too. Laura felt her breath catch in her throat. She had never imagined that her grandmother's past could be this dark, this filled with danger and betrayal. So, Edith left to protect herself. Marion nodded grimly. Yes, she disappeared because she had no other choice. And she did it out of love. For you, Laura. She didn't want you to grow up in the shadow of the dangers that were closing in on her. She thought that by leaving, she could keep you safe. She thought she could escape the past. But she couldn't, Laura whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. No, she couldn't, Marion replied, her gaze softening with sympathy. And that's why she never spoke about it. She wanted to protect you from knowing the truth, from the life she had left behind. But the truth always has a way of coming to light. Laura sat in stunned silence, her mind racing as she absorbed the weight of what Marion had told her. Jacob Rhodes, the man who had once captivated her grandmother's heart, had pulled Edith into a world of danger and deceit. And in the end, Edith had made the ultimate sacrifice, leaving everything behind to protect the people she loved. Where is Jacob now? Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marion's face darkened. I don't know. After Edith left, Jacob vanished. Some people say he went back to the life he came from, but others say he died. There were rumors of a violent end, but nothing was ever proven. One thing is certain, though, he never came looking for Edith after she left. Laura's mind swirled with the new information. Her grandmother's love story was far from the fairy tale she had imagined as a child. The man Edith had loved had led her down a path of darkness, and in the end, it had cost her everything. But what did that mean for Laura? Could the legacy of Edith's choices be haunting her too? Marion's voice interrupted Laura's thoughts. You need to understand, Laura, that your grandmother wasn't just running from Jacob. She was running from everything he had dragged her into, and in the end, she did it to protect you. If she hadn't made that choice, if she had stayed in that life, you would have never had the chance to grow up as you did, free from the shadow of that past. Laura nodded slowly, her chest tight with emotion. I don't know if I can forgive her for keeping all of this from me, but I understand now. She did what she thought was best for me. Marion reached out, placing a gentle hand on Laura's. You don't have to forgive her. She did what she had to do, Laura, but sometimes the people we love make choices that are too heavy to bear. And sometimes those choices have a ripple effect that lasts long after we're gone. Laura stood, the weight of Marion's words pressing on her like a physical force. Thank you, Marion. I think I need to be alone with this for a while. Marion nodded, her face softening with understanding. Take your time, dear. The past isn't something you can rush. As Laura stepped out of Marion's house and into the cool evening air, she felt the weight of the past settle on her shoulders. Edith's secret was no longer a distant mystery. It was a legacy of pain, love, and sacrifice that had shaped her grandmother's life in ways she could never have imagined. But it was also Laura's story now, and it was up to her to decide how to carry that legacy forward. The weight of Marian's words echoed in Laura's mind long after she left the old house on Elm Street. Jacob Rhodes, a name that had once been nothing more than a whisper of the past, now haunted her thoughts. He had been the catalyst for so many of Edith's choices, the love that had come with such an immense cost. But now, as the sun began to set and the shadows of the past stretched long across the road ahead, Laura knew she wasn't done. She couldn't stop, not when so many questions remained unanswered. What had truly happened to Jacob? Was he dead, as Marian had suggested, or was there more to the story? And if Jacob was alive, what did that mean for Laura, for her grandmother's legacy? The answers seemed just out of reach, and every step closer to the truth only seemed to raise more questions. As Laura drove back toward the house where she had grown up, she felt an uneasy sense of being followed, an intangible presence at her back, like an invisible hand on her shoulder. She shook the feeling off, telling herself it was just the weight of the mystery bearing down on her. But deep inside, she couldn't shake the nagging sense that she wasn't alone in this search. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Laura sat on the porch of her grandmother's house. The quiet hum of crickets filling the air. The cool breeze from the nearby woods rustled the leaves, but her mind was elsewhere. She had come so far, uncovered so many secrets, but there was still one question that loomed larger than all the rest. Where had Jacob gone? She had pored over the files from the Historical Society, searched through every corner of Edith's home, and spoken to everyone she could find, but nothing seemed to point to Jacob's final fate. No grave, no obituary. It was as if he had disappeared without a trace. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie. Laura turned to see a figure approaching from the edge of the yard. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized the man. "Mr. Miller?" she asked, her voice betraying a mixture of surprise and confusion. It was the local historian she had briefly spoken to earlier in her search. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, smiling slightly as he approached. "I thought I'd check in on you. I figured you might need a little help getting to the bottom of all this. You've been asking the right questions." Laura stood up, her thoughts racing. "I wasn't expecting anyone. How did you—" Mr. Miller cut her off gently. "I've been keeping an eye on the records, especially when it comes to families like yours. You'd be surprised how many secrets a small town can hide. You've been looking for Jacob Rhodes, haven't you?" Laura's stomach tightened. "Yes, but I can't find anything about him after he left town. Marian Ballard told me some things, but—" He nodded knowingly. "I thought as much. See, there's something about Jacob Rhodes you need to know that's never made it into the public record. Not many people would talk about it, and that includes Marian, but you're asking the right questions, and someone needs to tell you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Jacob wasn't just any criminal. He was involved in something much larger, something that threatened more than just his own life. And the reason no one can find him is because he's not dead. Not in the way you think, anyway. Laura's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? If he's not dead, then where is he?" Mr. Miller glanced around, as if to make sure no one else was listening. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Jacob Rhodes was connected to a ring of people. Dangerous people. He wasn't just a small-time crook. He was a part of something bigger, something that could have destroyed everything Edith had worked for, everything she loved. And when he disappeared, it wasn't because he died. He faked his death. He disappeared along with those people, and he's been hiding ever since." Laura's mind spun. "So Jacob, he's alive? He's been hiding all this time?" Mr. Miller nodded, his face grim. I believe so, and I believe he's still out there watching, waiting. That's why Edith had to leave. That's why she couldn't stay. Jacob didn't just leave her in the past. He dragged her into a future of shadows, and he's been hiding in those shadows ever since. Laura felt her knees weaken, and she sank back down into the chair, her hands trembling in her lap. But why didn't Edith tell me? Why didn't she tell me any of this? Because she didn't want to drag you into the same mess. She thought she could protect you, Laura. But the past, it has a way of catching up with you. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the branches of the trees as the night deepened. Laura stared out into the darkened woods, the weight of Mr. Miller's words settling over her like a shroud. If Jacob Rhodes was still out there, if he was still hiding in the shadows, then everything she had learned so far was only the beginning. The real danger, the real consequences, had yet to reveal themselves. "Where can I find him?" Laura asked quietly, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. "Where is Jacob Rhodes now?" Mr. Miller's eyes flickered, his expression unreadable. "I don't know, Laura, but I think you're closer than you realize. The clues are all around you. The people who were close to him, the places he frequented, they're all connected. You just have to know where to look." With that, Mr. Miller turned and walked back toward the street, leaving Laura alone with her thoughts. As she sat there, staring into the darkness, Laura realized that the past wasn't just something she could uncover and put behind her. It was alive. It was breathing, moving, and it was still hunting. Edith had tried to protect her, but now Laura understood the truth. She couldn't hide from it any longer. She had to face the ghosts of her grandmother's past, no matter the cost. The night was unusually still, the air thick with the sense of something about to break. Laura sat in the study, the room dimly lit by a single lamp, the silence pressing in on her. She had spent the past few days piecing together what she could about Jacob Rhodes, following the trail Mr. Miller had hinted at, but it seemed like every lead only led to more questions. Where was he? How could he still be alive after all these years? In her hands, she held a letter. It wasn't one of the ones Edith had written, but a new one, a letter she had found hidden behind a false wall in the attic. It had been placed there carefully, and it felt like the final piece of the puzzle. Laura had been too afraid to open it until now. She had known it was there, tucked behind the old floorboards, but it was only after her conversation with Mr. Miller that she realized she had to face whatever it contained. She had to know the whole truth, no matter how much it might hurt. With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter, her heart pounding as she read the words written in her grandmother's familiar, elegant handwriting. "My dearest Laura, if you are reading this, then it means you have found the pieces I left behind. I hope that by now you understand why I had to leave, why I had to keep the truth hidden, the truth about Jacob. I don't know if you will ever fully understand what happened between us or why I made the choices I did. But I want you to know that I did it all for you. You were the light in my life, the one thing that kept me going through the darkest of times. And when Jacob's world became too dangerous, when I knew he couldn't be saved, I chose to protect you from that world no matter the cost. Jacob did not die, as I once thought. I've been running from him for years, trying to erase his presence from my life and protect you from the danger he still poses. He's out there somewhere, waiting. He always has been. But Laura, my darling, I want you to know this. He was never the love of my life. You were, you are, and no matter what happens, you are stronger than anything the past could throw at you. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I'm sorry that you had to find out like this. But there is one last thing I must tell you. Jacob Rhodes has been watching us for years. But now he knows that you know, and he will come for you as he came for me. You can't run from him forever. But there is one more thing I must ask of you. One final request. When the time comes, when the shadows close in around you, don't face him alone. Don't make the mistake I made. Find your own strength, find your own allies, and protect those you love. I love you, Laura, more than words can say. Never forget that. With all my heart, Edith. The letter dropped from Laura's hands, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She had suspected that Edith's past had been more complicated than she had ever imagined, but the truth was more terrifying than anything she had prepared for. Jacob Rhodes wasn't just a figure from her grandmother's history. He was a living threat, and the legacy of his betrayal had followed them both all these years. The final words of Edith's letter echoed in her mind. When the time comes, when the shadows close in around you. She couldn't run from it any longer. Jacob Rhodes was still out there waiting, but this time Laura knew what she had to do. She couldn't just hide behind the walls her grandmother had built. The past had caught up to her, and it was time to confront it once and for all. The next morning, Laura packed a small bag, making sure to take the journal, the letters, and Edith's final letter with her. She wasn't sure where Jacob was, but she had to find him. She had to end this, for herself, for Edith, and for her future. She drove out of town, heading in the direction the clues had led her. There were whispers of Jacob's connection to a remote property in the woods outside of town, a place that had once been abandoned but now seemed to be a gathering place for those who lived in the shadows. It was there, in that forsaken place, that Laura felt she would find him. The roads grew narrower as she left the last of the town behind, and the trees began to close in around her. The air felt thicker, the shadows darker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Laura's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She wasn't sure what she would find when she got there, but she was no longer afraid. She had to do this. As she reached the end of the road, a dilapidated cabin appeared in the distance, half hidden by overgrown trees and vines. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't alone. Someone was watching her, she could feel it, but she kept moving forward. There was no turning back. She parked her car a distance away and cautiously approached the cabin. The door was ajar, and as she stepped inside, the scent of dust and decay filled the air. The room was empty, save for the faint outline of footprints in the dust that led to a hidden door at the back of the cabin. Her heart raced as she stepped forward, each movement deliberate, each step bringing her closer to the truth. The door creaked open, revealing a small room beneath the cabin, and there in the shadows stood Jacob Rhodes. He was just as she had imagined, a man who had once been handsome, now hardened by years of running, by the darkness he had chosen to embrace. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Laura," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "you shouldn't have come." But Laura didn't flinch. She had spent her whole life running from the shadows of her grandmother's past. Now she was ready to face them. "I came to end this," she said firmly, stepping closer. "Whatever this is between us, it ends today." Jacob's eyes flickered, but there was no fear in them, only a cold recognition. "You're brave. I'll give you that. But you can't change what's already been done." Laura took a deep breath, feeling the strength of Edith's love within her. "I don't need to change the past. I'm here to make sure the future is different." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, her steps steady and sure. Jacob watched her leave, but he didn't follow. The past had no hold on her anymore. As she stepped back into the sunlight, Laura felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The shadows were still there, but they no longer controlled her. Edith's love, the strength of her choices had passed on to her, and it was enough to face whatever came next.